Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are dialing in from today. This is Michael Jansen. I am the founder and CEO of Cityzenith, and it's a pleasure to welcome everybody today to this wonderful webinar that we have hosted in partnership with friends at the World Economic Forum, Accenture, and Schneider Electric. This is a very unique time that we're living in. We have as we all are very aware from watching the news these days, the urgency of now needing to reconsider energy policy and our sources of energy and our consumption of energy is probably more important than it has ever been. And this webinar will focus on decarbonization, specifically in cities, buildings, and infrastructure. And I will introduce each of our key panel members here in a moment, and we'll get into the event. Just for the format real quick, we will be presenting for about 30 minutes or so. Our guests will speak first, I will speak next, and then we will ask for questions from the audience. That's always my favorite part. So I'm looking forward to being able to, along with my colleagues on the panel, address those questions later. Allow me to introduce our esteemed guests today. First, Mr. Oliver Tsai, who is the platform curator for the Net Zero Carbon Cities team at the World Economic Forum. He currently leads program development on decarbonizing the urban built environment and has served as project manager on the forum's building value framework, which today's panelists will be sharing more about. Prior to joining the forum, Oliver worked as a professional civil engineer with over 14 years of industry experience in water systems planning and delivery, and enterprise consulting for public utilities. With him, we have Amr Hossein Gambari, who is a senior manager at Accenture's comms and media practice with more than 15 years of project and research experience in the tech world. Amr Hussein's career covers a range of practices, mainly with the aim of connecting businesses and technology together. And not very long ago, Amr Hussein, like many other concerned citizens, has become aware and involved in the rising eco-awakening and has become passionate about his part in this movement. And shortly, we are expected to be joined by one more gentleman, Mr. Vincent Minier, who is running just a bit behind today, but he's expected to join soon. He is Vice President of Global Strategy, Perspective, and External Affairs at Schneider Electric. With over 25 years of experience at Schneider Electric with different positions at both operations and the global level, Vincent joined the World Economic Forum as a Materials, Energy, and Infrastructure Platform Fellow. As an energy expert, Vincent is involved today in several international organizations, think tanks, and industry associations. He holds a Doctor of Science degree in optoelectronics, engineering degree in physics, completed by a Finance for Executive Education program as well at NCED. And as soon as he is able to join us, he'll be a part of the conversation. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of this. And I'm going to now hand over the stage to Oliver Tsai, who will begin with his presentation. Oliver.
Great. Thanks, Michael, so much for having us on. It's great to have Cityzenith as part of the Net Zero community at the forum. And it's a real pleasure today to be here having this conversation with you and your listeners. So we're very excited to share with everyone about the work that we've been doing on the Net Zero Carbon Cities building value framework. We put out a briefing paper in January and are now doing outreach to speak with key stakeholders and other interested parties about it. And for today, I wanted to start by providing some background on the Net Zero Carbon Cities program, followed by some context on the role of buildings and how we're thinking about that. And I'll wrap my segment up by describing the process that we took on developing the building value framework. After I go, Amir Hussein and Vincent, my close team members on this project, will then walk us through defining the framework itself and describe some detailed findings on some practical applications that listeners out there can take to use this body of knowledge. So I wanted to start off by just recognizing the importance of the urban ecosystem on the global pathway to net zero. And at the forum, our mission on the Net Zero Carbon Cities program is to create this enabling environment for clean electrification and circularity, as we recognize that those are the two key levers to addressing operational emissions on one hand and embodied emissions on the other hand. Those are being the two main drivers of decarbonization for buildings and infrastructure. And we do this by taking an integrated approach across energy, mobility, and built environment systems in the urban landscape. And so just providing some overview of the NZCC program, just to share some different initiatives that we're focused on. I think that first on the top row, we aim to drive change by convening leaders at a global level among CEOs, subject matter experts, leading thinkers in academia, and senior policymakers in government. And I think that that's what most folks out there know the forum as. You know, we have our annual meeting where we hold sessions to talk about these big issues. But I also wanted to share and point out that we also do have work at around the calendar year at local levels. And we've created a campaign to localize net zero by bringing global solutions to the city level. And we're doing this through two different strategies. First is something that we're called City Sprints, which is a series of workshops that involve businesses, government, civil society leaders, and local stakeholders, which aims to bring, to bridge the gap across all urban sectors to identify targeted solutions for each subject city. We've conducted about 6 or 7 so far, and we're currently partnering with Resilient Cities Network and the NIUA in India, as well as Accenture on continuing rollout of these sprints in the upcoming year. Secondly, I wanted to point out the toolbox of solutions that we have, which is a searchable online database. It currently contains over 200 localized solutions and best practices taken from all across the world. And these include technical solutions, technologies, policies, and business models that have been used successfully in the field. And it goes to show that decarbonization solutions already exist. They're already out there. And we don't need to wait for the next big innovation to be able to take action today. It's a living database, so that means that we are continually seeking and adding new solutions to it, and it's completely publicly accessible. So we encourage folks to check out the website. You see a link in the middle of the page there, weforum.org/nzcc/toolbox. So, please take a visit, have a look. And there's ways to submit solutions as well. So please follow up with us if any of you are interested in doing that. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the deep dives that we're taking on going a little more in a more detailed level into sector focus. And to help move the needle, the NZCC program is aiming to advance net zero by leveraging clean electrification and digital technologies in urban energy systems. And what this means for each sector across mobility, built environment, and energy is that we are trying to get more energy to come from renewable sources. It means getting more vehicles, heating and cooling systems, and other urban systems to be powered through clean electricity. And it means getting buildings and the built environment to become more energy efficient and more circular. So on that last note, let's start drilling down a little bit into cities and the built environment. And I'm sure that you've all heard some these statistics before, but just really quickly, cities are at the front line of tackling climate change. And that's true for a lot of reasons. If we just look purely at the numbers, over half the world's population currently lives in cities. And this is going to be expected to increase to over 2/3 by the year 2050 as population growth and urbanization continue. And furthermore, over 70% of carbon emissions are currently generated in urban ecosystems. So, these are all kind of major factors to consider. And I think from a more qualitative standpoint, cities have the ability to enact policies and deliver programs that are directly impact project implementation and behaviors on the ground where the rubber meets the road. So a lot of cases, city governments actually have a lot more leverage and a lot more influence than we give. We all give them credit. So that's why we focus on it. Let's just go to the next slide here. So quickly about why buildings are important. First, there's the direct climate impact of the built environment through carbon emissions in this sector. And buildings generate about 38% of global energy-related emissions. 28% of this is from the operational emissions related to building systems, as we described before, and 10% are related to embodied emissions from materials and construction. Secondly is the massive scale of the built environment is staggering. As rapid urbanization continues, it just continues to drive construction of buildings in cities worldwide. And it's estimated, I think there's a statistic out there saying that globally, construction of new floor area equal to the size of the city of Paris is going to be built every week from now until 2060 to meet increasing demands from population growth. So that's a staggering figure. And according to the World Green Building Council, construction of green buildings in emerging markets itself presents over $24 trillion investment opportunity by 2030. So looking at the numbers, that's really tremendous. So that was on new construction. But what about existing buildings? So I think that if we look and zoom into the developed markets and economies, there's another statistic out there that states that over 80% of all buildings that we need by the year 2050 already exist today. And you consider that only about 1.7% of buildings, I think, in the US right now are considered green buildings. And fewer than 1% of buildings in the world are considered green buildings today. So, you take both of those types of statistics about the tremendous rate of construction that's needed in the emerging marketplace and the tremendous rate of retrofit of existing building stock that you have in developed cities. And, putting those together, those figures signal just a massive challenge and opportunity to decarbonize and to make buildings more sustainable through both retrofit and proper design and planning of new construction. And finally, I rattled off a lot of numbers and statistics, but I think that most importantly, we need to consider the human element of what all of this means. And according to the EPA, there's some study that says that Americans, on average, spend 93% of our lives indoors under some sort of roof. I think that it breaks down into 87%, within a building or a structure of some sort. And think about that, and the exact figure is going to vary by country and by climate. And I think that the pandemic has certainly affected the amount of time that people spend outdoors, for leisure pursuits. But as a population, buildings continue to play a pivotal role in our lives and our livelihoods. And, buildings are just, they're places that we live. They're places that we work. We go to learn and we play. And, something that when you look at the headlines today about what's going on, it's a sobering reminder that, buildings are places, hospitals. We go to hospitals to heal, and we gather at churches to worship. And it's easy to take for granted, but I think that we need to take stock and really appreciate the tremendous impact that the built environment has on all of our lives. And something that we've set out to consider is, how does delivering sustainable buildings add human value to better social and environmental outcomes? In other words, how do we do things better for humans and nature? And that's something that we're going to get into with Amir Hussain. But it's a critical factor. So, whoops, Michael, sorry, I think I might have given you a false start there. Got a couple.
No, oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to thank you. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Yep, sorry about that. Just a little bit of a preview for Amir Hussain's section. So, I want to talk a little bit about how the NZCC team has approached this issue. And so at the forum, in collaboration with Accenture, we initially set out to ask, how can we mobilize and accelerate investments towards decarbonizing technologies in buildings? And, we took the approach recognizing the importance of multi-stakeholder action to solve complicated challenges that require public-private cooperation. And what we did was we set out to build a project community of stakeholders that reflected the complex and diverse ecosystem of the urban built environment, meaning that we brought together representatives and business leaders from all the relevant industries, covering buildings, real estate, developers, asset managers, engineering and construction companies, energy technologies, utilities, and banking and investors. So, it really just goes to show like all of the players that have to come together to make this happen. And we recognize that all of these players hold critical pieces to solving the decarbonization puzzle. Through our conversations, it became clear that in order to deliver the net zero building at scale, the decision makers that were really key to this process turned out to be asset owners, asset managers, and investors as being the key decision makers who could guide investments to the proper projects. So when you look at finance and kind of the financial metrics that trigger these decisions, I think that most payback periods for decarbonizing investments are often longer than the 4 to 7 year time horizon that most investors in the real estate sector base their decisions on. So taking that into account, the challenge then became, how do we change the calculus of the perception of cost and value so that investing in net zero projects makes sense to these decision makers? And what we developed with that cross-industry working group was, through a series of workshops and interviews and focus group conversations, we jointly created this framework that aims to address the challenge by shifting the conversation from focusing purely on a cost-driven decision to considering the holistic value that's delivered by greener buildings. And so all of this is summarized by the building value framework that we put together. And we have a briefing paper that was put out in January, and there's a link there if anyone's curious. Please take a look. And I'll pause here now to hand over to Amir Hussain from Accenture.
Yes, thank you very much. It was wonderful, Oliver, and your phrasing of the problem, your supporting of the problem with facts, and your wording is just absolutely fantastic. I really do hope everybody was able to pay attention and really sink into what Oliver is sharing. Oliver, thank you. Amir Hussain, you're next. You're up. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Amir Hussain here. First of all, thank you so much, Oliver and Michael, for the introduction and also for the good words that, or basically the very well description that Oliver has given us about the problem and where we have started our journey, basically. So let me quickly give you some sort of an agenda that what is it that I'm going to talk about in these couple of minutes that I will bother you and take your time on the matter. So first of all, back to what Oliver started to talk about, this building value framework. I will briefly talk about that. Why do we need this building value framework? I will also describe to you, I'll try my best to describe to you as much as possible that what was the methodology that we use. So basically, how did we come to this the discussion, and how did we get the information? How did we do the analysis? And basically, how did we create this building value framework? Later on, I will go back to the framework itself. I will introduce a framework for you guys, and then we'll give a little glimpse into it. And then I will end my part with giving you a case study, or better said, part of one of the case studies, one of the multiple case studies that I've referred to, or basically that we have had put together for our briefing paper. All of this information, of course, in a more written format and a slightly different presentation, is of course something that you can find, and it is on the document that Oliver mentioned, and the link I think was before there, and I think we will put the link somewhere for you guys. So first of all, why the building value framework? As Oliver was talking about, this building value framework is a tool in a sense that has been developed in collaboration with the World Economic Forum, the stakeholders of the World Economic Forum. Basically, some sort of a multi-stakeholder and cross-industry leaders were involved in order to get this. And all of them were, of course, the guys and gals who were from the building environment and building ecosystem. So very well informed about this. The main purpose of doing this was to accelerate the investments in decarbonization of the urban built environment. The framework itself, of course, aims to shift how the value of decarbonization is perceived. As Oliver was talking about it, you can only imagine that up until recently, most of the discussions has always been on just the financial side of the story. But we think that that is a bit short-sighted in a way, if I may call it like that. So to shift how the value of decarbonization is perceived, and also how it is defined by proposing a more holistic decision-making approach. Basically, in this approach, we want to recognize the importance of social and environmental outcomes and system performances. So as a result of that, BVF, which is the abbreviation that we've chosen for a building value framework, is a tool that we believe it will guide decision makers, the three main groups that Oliver referred to, in linking holistic performance outcomes to the traditional financial outcomes. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that neither of them is more important than the other. We need to be holistic. One example that I can give you on that is improved tenant satisfaction increases rental value. Let's dive a little deeper to that. But before talking about what you see on your screen, let me quickly go over the methodology that we use. A very straightforward first-step methodology, quite common in the world of consultancy where I come from. So basically, we started to gather the inputs. How did we do that? We gather insights from our working group. Oliver referred to those. We also did a series of interviews with subject matter experts, or our SMEs, from different sectors within the built environment. For example, we talked to building consultants, facility owners, end users, designers, builders, etc. We also talked to the financiers, or the financial side of the story, basically banks and investors that are involved in these kind of projects or are not involved in these kind of projects. We also talked to sustainability experts, technology providers, and these basically formed as the SMEs, or the subject matter experts that were quite on this topic. And of course, we did quite many internal team brainstormings, World Economic Forum, Schneider Electric, and of course the Accenture. Then we analyzed the information that we got through a qualitative approach, nothing very specific about it. The method that we used was mainly qualitative approach for the analysis, nothing too particular to describe there. But then what we could have done was that we came up with a draft of the building value framework based on what we've got. And then we started to test that. So we got the building value framework as a result of the analysis. We went back to our SMEs and also working groups. And then what we did there was that we started to test all of these with all of the stakeholders that we had and with the working groups. Once that was done, we were sort of confident that, okay, now we've got a working building value framework. But in order to make that final check or final go stamp on it, what we did then was we started to test it against some real cases that were out there, meaning that the buildings or the projects or the assemblies that were done with the intention of being sustainable and green and have the decarbonization as one of their major agendas here. So we started to do that, and then we put that together. Basically, here we did some multiple real-life developments, or we looked into some multiple real-life developments from different geographies and economies. And then the main stakeholders, typically developers, were interviewed for that matter. And what we discussed basically there was the main objective of the project, or the initiative as a whole that they did, different decarbonization initiatives that they did within the bigger investment, within the bigger project. And also we asked quite many questions on the impacts. both non-financial and financial. And here's where we come to the picture that you folks see on your screen. So quickly going through it, let's not forget, we are here talking about the need to move from purely financial KPIs that you see on the right-hand side to value-driven investments, basically to see the bigger picture. And we want to have both sides of the story. Buildings and the built environment are considerable and important part of the city. Let's not forget about that. And the bigger society also that we live in. So it's not enough that we just talk about the buildings and we talk about any initiative and the impact that it makes for just the investors or the direct owner or the asset owner. So we need to look at the bigger projects. So basically all the stakeholders that one way or another, they interact with the building. As a result of that, we have the two sides that we believe are very important. On the left-hand side, you see the non-financial outcomes, either on the asset outcome or the city outcome. Quickly going through them, emissions reduction and its subsidiaries, of course, environmental improvement, user satisfaction, systemic value efficiency, and then socioeconomic improvement. These are all the outcomes that are being observed by different types of buildings that have the net zero or decarbonization as a major agenda for those. Or if they do not, these are the things that we believe are common among most of the buildings and should be recognized once a decarbonization project is being put in place. And then, of course, on the right-hand side, you have the financial outcomes. You have the rent increase, revenue increase, OPEX reduction. These are basically the impacts. CAPEX reduction, asset value increase, compliance cost reduction, financing cost reduction, and brand value increase. So as a conclusion for this, let's not forget about it. Decarbonization investments bring more value than only decarbonizing the building. So it's not just about decarbonizing the building that we're talking. For instance, asset owner paying attention to more or less non-financial, as an example, a city mayor who is more sensitive toward local jobs. That is what we are referring to as the city outcomes, as just one example of that. Therefore, as a result of this, we believe that BVF, or Building Value Framework, reveals the hidden and also shows the actual value. Let me go through one of the case studies that I'm flipping the slides. Yes, one of the case studies, just to give you a better feeling of what I was just talking about. I'm going to talk about one of the cases that we have dived into and we have looked thoroughly into it. It is a case that we call it NLX. Basically, NLX delivered an integrated building project under some sort of a public-private partnership with the municipality of San Mauro Turinese, hoping that I'm pronouncing the name right, which is located in a temperate climate zone in northern Italy. The municipality's vision or aim was to digitalize and retrofit their portfolio of buildings. So there were a series of older buildings that they owned, including public offices, town hall, sport facilities, while they wanted to maintain the historical architecture of the city. The project's main objectives were to reduce municipal operating expenditures and also increase the energy efficiency at both building and portfolio levels. And this was supposed to be done while maximizing the quality of life and public services for the people, basically for the, the city customers, so to speak, residents, if I may call it like that, because the location is also a touristic area, so we can call them city customers as well, in a sense. In this engagement, if I may call it like that, hybrid heating systems as one of the major investments, Iot Platform, another one, also thermal installations, PV panels, street lamp replacements with LED lighting, and some other specific technologies were used, which now I will specifically talk about the Iot platform that the guys have used there. Basically, by the implementation of the Iot platform, the main idea here that the project and also the city had in mind was that the Iot platform should integrate various types of data sources, including weather forecast, internal real-time environmental data like temperature, humidity, etc. And then also some hardware performance was supposed to be monitored and taken into the equation. And then, of course, the energy consumption was set to be monitored. The Iot platform itself enables planning of the time to reach temperature set points, as well as early detection of the operating anomalies and system malfunctions as one of the other major outcomes that was supposed to be obtained from the implementation of the Iot platform. And last but not least, the Iot platform assists in management of 32 buildings. So one platform for 32 buildings all in all. Quickly about the platform itself, then what was supposed to get out of this Iot platform in terms of decarbonization, if we want to talk about the non-financial outcomes that were obtained or were reached, a summary from the BVF that I showed you earlier, minimizing operating carbon was reached. And how was that done? Basically by implementing some machine learning algorithms, smart regulation of heating activation time was possible. So basically, that was one of the major things that could be done by the Iot platform that lead into minimizing the operating carbon. At the same time, it allowed NLX and the building owner and the asset owner to basically monitor the consumption data, which also could be used as a feedback loop in order to regulate the building's temperature and all of the other matters so that it could minimize the operating carbon. At the same time, financial outcomes were, of course, achieved that you see in the middle of the screen marked with green. Basically, what was done here was that the Iot platform enabled NLX to maintain and operate building and equipment based on the data. What was the impact? I just wanted to say that simply put, but it was not that simple, to be honest. Increasing energy efficiency and reducing operating expenditures. At the same time, reduce CapEx and improve quality of service due to reduced downtime. Let me stop here and hand over to Vincent, who will basically walk us through how to operationalize BVF. And of course, we have Michael as well.
We did see Vincent. Vincent, if you're there, please come back with your camera on. I did see that somebody left the room. I wasn't sure if it was him or somebody else might be having technical difficulties, Amr Hossein, so we'll give him a second. Yeah. You might have to step in.
Yeah, Michael, this is Oliver here. I think, I saw Vincent pop in for a second. I think he's having some connection issues. So let's, Amir Hussein, I think we're going to have to work on the cup here, on the fly here, but let's try to cover as much as we can about Vincent's slide now and see if he can join us for the Q&A. So I'll take a first shot at this. So apologies to the audience. This was not previously my slide, but so we had, as part of the building value framework, there was an accompanying operational checklist that would be is usable to help asset owners and decision makers in assessing where they stand currently in their project or assessing their portfolio, and basically using this to look at what types of interventions that they could take from wherever they're starting from to decarbonize their building. And we had also grouped these along with three key insights along these three categories you see on the left, where one of them is investing in decarbonization technologies and bundling them for greater impact, basically meaning you can have one particular technology standing alone, but if you complement various technologies, bundle complementary technologies together, you can have an additive effect where they can enhance the performance working together. Secondly, there's a key insight on investing in digital technologies. And, I'm sure that this is something that many folks in this audience, and Michael, I'm sure you're very well versed in the power of digital tools to enable greater monitoring, management of not just the building on its own, but as well as the system, an interconnected system potentially across a portfolio or across a part of a city or a district, as Amir Hussain had mentioned in the case study. And finally, to invest in city ecosystem services, which is not something that an individual asset owner could take on their own, but I think that this one is really more of a guidance towards city stakeholders and those who are operating more from the public sector, but to look at how you can design your systems in order to interact with the grid and local energy infrastructure in a smarter way, and to contribute to the mobility and transportation networks as well. So, I won't read through the 9 points of the checklist, but I can say that from a high level, they focus primarily on operational emissions. It's about energy efficiency. It's about electrification, providing on-site renewable electricity, which are then enabled by digital technologies and digital tools that let you monitor and have enhanced connectivity. We think that this checklist is a starting point that can, is basically the starting point of a playbook where an asset owner can align their product and their portfolio with ESG standards. And, it's meant to be used as a guidance. And we are currently working with our project stakeholders and community and are performing outreach to speak to other stakeholders about this, to gather feedback on, what points resonate with people out there. How can we improve this? And how can we take this and scale it to a level where others can where it can help others decarbonize their buildings and portfolios. So let me just pause there and see if Amir Hussain, did I miss anything on this last slide here?
I think you covered it well, Oliver. I cannot add much more than that, honestly.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. What a really exhaustive presentation, and to see the perspective from the WF and from private companies that are acting significantly in this sector, both on the consulting side and on the equipment and implementation side, is fascinating. And part of what we were talking about earlier is that one of the themes of this discussion is achieving net zero in the built environment, from global to local solutions. And you can see how the World Economic Forum is thinking globally about policy, about moving mountains. I mean, and things that can be implemented, in countries, in regions around the world. Accenture plays a key role. As a jack of all trades systems integrator specialist in this, their business is so interesting because they can run entire parts of cities. They advise heavily cities to make them more efficient across sectors, from mobility to transportation. So they have a unique perspective here in consulting and advising cities to make change. And the same thing with Schneider Electric. I hope Vincent can come back for the Q&A. Hopefully while I get my presentation, we can attend to his technical details, but Schneider has had a long-standing role, and the CEO speaks regularly about their role on the global stage, about the need for decarbonization and achieving net zero ambitions at all scales globally. So thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I'm going to spend a few minutes on the local part of this, which is what we can do as individual smaller companies and in spaces, and then we're going to come back to the Q&A and pick up with you then. So, thank you everyone for joining. Many of you have attended our webinars before. We had over 800 registrations today, which is tremendous, and hundreds of attendees. Thank you all from around the world for coming. I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of build upon what Oliver and Amir Hussain have laid out as a framework, and talk about how we as a company really participate in this kind of value continuum, if you will, and what we see the next couple of years sort of shaping up like. So we specialize in an area of technology called urban digital twins. Urban digital twins are 3D replicas of physical buildings and assets in cities, connected to the data in and around them. And they are used to optimize all aspects of urban planning, of construction, and of the operations and maintenance of building assets really at any scale. If you think of urban digital twins, think of SimCity, if that helps, but for real cities. Think of Minecraft that architects and planners can play with. Think of things like that. And you'll get a really wonderful perspective on what urban digital twins are and can do. So I will show you kind of a brief video to kind of jump right into some of the work that we've recently involved with. We recently completed our first phase of a digital twin project in Las Vegas. I think if we shared that video with you, you'll get kind of a quick summary of what this is all about.
39% of global carbon emissions come from the buildings in our cities. Currently, less than 2% of America's 6 million office buildings are green. What if we could help buildings, infrastructure, and cities reach net zero faster, without risk, and at a fraction of the cost? At Cityzenith, that's what we do. Our Smart World platform leverages cutting-edge AI to automate the complex decarbonization process. Powerful 3D visualization tools help clients analyze and predict performance in real time, simplifying financial and operational decision-making. Thanks to our partnership with the City of Las Vegas, our Las Vegas digital twin features an unprecedented level of real-time sustainability data. Outside buildings, sensors monitor complex metrics, feeding data continuously into Smart World, including information about traffic density and air quality, helping planners, developers, and city officials make Las Vegas a more efficient, sustainable, and enjoyable city. Inside buildings, Smart World OS allows users to optimize their operational and energy systems, ensuring occupants enjoy a high-quality environment. Cityzenith's new Smart World OS Net Zero module continuously monitors clients' energy consumption, tenant behavior, and renewables performance, making it simple to purchase high-quality, verified carbon offsets to ensure properties maintain net zero compliance, providing the only true end-to-end net zero solution for building owners today. Cityzenith. We pledge to make the built environment a cleaner, safer, more efficient place for all. Join us.
Thank you. So that's digital twins, and I thank you for enjoying that 2-minute video. There's a lot to what digital twins are achieving these days, especially in cities. As many of you know, we last June joined the World Economic Forum's community in their Net Zero Carbon Cities program, and we have the pleasure of working with them and experts throughout the organization to take on some of these initiatives, and we're focusing, specifically on some of their initiatives around buildings. Urban digital twins can reduce operating costs significantly by 35% or more in buildings, boost productivity significantly, and also cut emissions, which we have been discussing throughout the course of this panel. I'm going to explain exactly how we do that with urban digital twins. It's a growing opportunity. I think digital twins were an idea for cities some time back, and there was an idea that maybe GIS or BIM would become maybe something like that. They didn't. A different industry emerged. which is today's projected to save cities something like $280 billion in planning, development, and operating costs every year. And the market for digital twins grew from, I think, $3 billion last year. It's projected to be 48 billion by 26, and I think now 60-ish billion by 2027. So those numbers keep changing. So the reason we're here is that we all know, and we talked about it today, that the inconvenient truth, buildings in cities are the world's largest polluters. 75–85% of all emissions in cities come from buildings. 39%, that number moves around. Some say 33, some say 35. It's a lot of total emissions globally are just buildings. And 3/4 of all buildings in Western countries specifically need to be retrofitted in order to achieve net zero emissions. So, as you heard Oliver say earlier, only 1.7% of America's 6 million office buildings, or 100 billion square feet of office buildings, is actually green. That's a long way to go. And only 0.008% of all of our buildings are actually truly net zero. So there's a lot that needs to happen here in order for cities to really achieve these mandates. And you think about it, we now see 1,000 cities that have talked about wanting to be net zero. We now know that 75–85% of the problem in the majority of those cities is buildings. Yet, no platform has emerged that automates that process for the building owner from beginning to end. It makes that easy, and there's a reason for that. Because it's a fairly complex process that requires multiple steps, multiple transactions over time. One thing that will have to happen is that smart building or energy management technology will have to be installed, sensor-based, to be able to monitor energy performance and optimize it in real time. We'll have to use renewables both on and off site as maximally as we can, and that will vary by building type, age, location. For example, a warehouse, we can blanket the roof with solar, but that's hard to do in a tall building, which is why solar glass is becoming such an important innovation, because there have been estimates that if you replaced every panel of glass in Manhattan with solar glass, that you could power the city. Think about that. Step 3 would be to offset that residual need for fossil fuels, because most buildings will still continue to consume oil and gas, by acquiring carbon offsets from solutions in the world, whether those are local or global, that are pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, whether those are sequestered forests, which I think is a wonderful solution, because basically incentivizes, creates this kind of value system chain, which where you incentivize building owners to with carbon offsets that are then used to reforest the planet, and that's a model that we're seeing these days. And finally, you need a tool that can continuously monitor all this, because getting a building to net zero takes usually some years, and sometimes you don't get there, and you have to make adjustments. So continuous monitoring becomes key. There's a lot driving this now. It's the Build Back Better bill, and is part of it, and making a lot of funds available for these types of efforts. I think 60 billion specifically on green buildings. That's huge. And then, but from a mandate perspective, cities around the United States, as well as, of course, already long before across Europe, are mandating that building owners reduce emissions. New York City has one of the most advanced and, frankly, very thoughtful plans to do that, to zero. They've made a mandate that by 2050 they're going to zero, and they're now rolling out how to do it. For the majority of building stock, it's a question of two things: electrification of a building with heat pumps and sealing it better. Something like 50% of the energy that in the majority of American housing is just basically powers our buildings, basically just dissipates out of our window seams, through our sills, through the joints, through our mullions, through cracks, and it's literally a poor ceiling. So these two issues need to be addressed at scale. Boston, St. Louis, Washington, D.C., they've all passed legislation. It's no longer, hey, it's a nice thing. It's now you have to do it or there's fines. Oliver was talking about some of the reasons people don't do it. It's been typically cost. Can be $2 to $7 per foot. If you're overseas in Europe, that's 20 to 70 cents per square meter. And if you consider that energy costs for a building owner in the US is about $2.10 per foot per year for the whole property. This is a big number. And with payback periods as such for green building retrofit installations being 10 to 15 years, and 50% of commercial building owners requiring that we have paybacks within 3 or less, and almost everybody is saying 5 or less, that means the majority of folks just aren't interested, or simply haven't been interested because the money doesn't work for them. We really have seen most of the prominent efforts in retrofitting among major corporations that have large CSR and sustainability budgets to work with, Google, Microsoft, and others. And let's just be honest, those are all exceptions to the rule. We have to be concerned with the rule. So one of the big issues was that there hasn't been a platform, as I mentioned, to make all of this happen. And as such, green building retrofit consulting today is a cottage industry of small consultants. It's expensive, it's inconsistent, it's labor intensive, and as such, it's because it's manual, it's risky. Thousands of single-purpose energy management tools have flooded the market, promoting all kinds of individual proprietary standards, which confuses building owners. And the result is that owners just don't want to lay out the money, which is a substantial capital outlay, with all that uncertainty. So our thought process around building Smart World, our core product, which you just saw a clip of, was to have an all-in-one data solution that could integrate these disparate points essential in the calculus of net zero buildings, from building systems to the architect's drawings, et cetera, into a common model that would allow us to optimize that path to net zero emissions. You can see here in the image on the right the different tools that are part of that equation. It's shocking. And that guy in the middle is your average owner trying to figure out what to do about all of that. So what digital twins are uniquely powerful with here is helping us to aggregate all of that complex data and those complex tools you just saw into a common framework. So now we can simulate using all of their data in a common framework. That helps us to predict energy consumption and financial outcomes at scale, and way drives down our capital risk in doing so. The key is using that digital twin, and what digital twins do uniquely powerful, and this needs to be understood, is simultaneous parallel modeling. So the impact of one system on another system on another system. You can get different tools to do just one thing. Very difficult to get tools that can monitor the impact and track the impact of energy emissions, and traffic, and pedestrian flow, on occupancy, on rent, all these different issues which can be optimized only using digital twins. That's the power of this type of technology to solve this problem. And because they're space-time based, that means you have your own digital twin account, you have your own 3D model and 2D interface of your assets that are being continuously updated with information on the fly. Some of our digital twin projects have hundreds and hundreds of data sources, and some of those real time. That gives you the perfect sort of all-in-one sort of dashboard to watch everything happening and at scale, not just over one building or 100, but millions, or in an entire city. So we kind of developed this to work with property owners, facility managers, infrastructure operators, energy firms, architects, engineers, governments. And the types of projects we do include entire cities, but more often than not, a kind of campus or district scale project like airports, seaports, large scale infrastructure projects, mixed use commercial things, usually downtown, urban regeneration core projects, master developments. Campuses are a fantastic partner for us. And then sometimes entire real estate portfolios. And we think that we achieved some things. We have developed one of the most advanced digital twin platforms for a city of its kind in the building industry. It is the most flexible and scalable. It is the only one that actually operates pan life cycle, from design through carbon offset acquisition. We've developed a community of application developers who are now beginning to build applications leveraging Smart World to deliver specific things. And we've been very lucky to have some wonderful partners, of course, the World Economic Forum being among them. And we're so super happy to be a part of their program and hope we can really contribute as we continue to learn. So, business-wise, we work different ways. I won't kind of get into it, but we do projects, we do partners with folks, and we have this model emerging where we actually give the technology out free to cities, and that allows us to collaborate with local green building authorities in working with local building owners in those cities. So that initiative we call Clean Cities, Clean Future, and we rolled it out recently. There's now several cities that we are running those first projects with, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. That includes Vegas, includes Phoenix. Phoenix is with Amazon and the Downtown Phoenix Partnership, and we're about to zero in on our first, we think, building owner. The key is to take data at a civic scale and to identify the energy patterns, and then that tell us where decarbonization should focus first, and then zero in on decarbonizing those buildings in the city first. That is basically what all of these projects are about. So we take a bunch of data, as we do in Phoenix, working with Arizona State. Our new CTO, I haven't even talked about him yet, Mr. Prashant Bose is a data scientist. He was, among many other things, the head of AI and data science at Starbucks. He was the head of AI and data science at Acuity, which is right in this pocket, where he was also head of digital twin there. And he had 10 years as a top researcher at Lockheed Martin in digital twin in this space. So he's one of actually the country's leading experts. And he's now beginning to work with this data to be able to ascertain trends and patterns from it. And we'll talk more about that later, but basically the relationship between extreme heat in Phoenix and the cost of energy and affordability and the pressure that puts on people. And remember, net zero buildings are cheaper. Net zero buildings are cheaper. So we can leverage the digital twin to identify the areas where we should be focusing, which are most stressed from a carbon perspective, and then begin decarbonizing those one at a time. So, we've done a bunch of these that are pilots in the past. I'm not really going to get into these because I want to get into the Q&A because so many exciting things to talk about. This net zero module is wonderful. We are continuing to work with cities from all over the world, and I think the goal is to have about 10 cities and about 50 buildings by the end of the year signed up and operational. I think this Clean Cities, Clean Future pledge now is such a, we're so honored that this has gotten the kind of attention that it has, which was mentioned over 1,000 times in the international media over the last 12 months or so, really kind of everywhere. And we're super thrilled about that because we think there's a chance to unlock a lot of value in a very, very big market to make the money behind the decarbonization work very effectively for the people who are the most responsible for the carbon, the building owners. And as you guys know, in cities in the United States and in Europe, only 5% of the assets are owned publicly, 95% are owned privately. And unless it's Singapore or a place like that where you can have such strict mandates, these decisions have to make financial sense. That's so key. Our vision is to do 10 cities now this year, 100 by 2024, then 300 by 2026. I'm going to just leave you with a quick peek at a video that we did that will be back on TV starting in May, running for several months across the US, and here it is.
In just a few decades, 68% of us will be living in cities. But did you know that cities account for 3/4 of all global CO2 emissions, and population growth and poor planning is making the problem worse? With our transformational AI software platform, we pledge to try and make the world's most polluted cities more sustainable, clean, and efficient, because we want to build a better future for our children, and we want you to join us.
Okay, I'm going to ask my colleagues to rejoin me. That is the end of all the presentations, and I'm sure there's a thank you very much. And let me introduce Vincent. He's here. We're so happy. Thank you for joining. We did introduce you earlier, but please introduce yourself, Vincent.
Yes, so Vincent Minier from Schneider Electric, and I will start by saying that I am French, so I will not change the the image of French people of being late. So I'm really sorry to be so late. So I'm working at global strategy in what we call prospective and external affairs, focusing on building decarbonization notably, and interacting with a number of organizations and think tanks, and passionate about building decarbonization. I guess everyone knows Schneider Electric is a tech company developing many solutions and softwares and BIM for buildings and industries, by the way.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being a part of this. I'm going to ask people from the audience to please put your comments in the chat, and you can ask anybody anything you like. I'll go through them in the order in which they were received, and see if I can get to everybody that I possibly can. So let's see here. Somebody was asking about the Clean City, Clean Future program, which I just addressed. Let me see, I'm kind of scrolling up. There's a question from Ivan Lang. Who are the WEF stakeholders? Maybe somebody, did you mention stakeholders perhaps in your, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Michael. So I think I mentioned stakeholders in the context that, our methodology and our process was to convene a rather diverse group of forum stakeholders. I don't want to mention anybody by name now, but just because I don't want to leave anybody out. But it really covers real estate, engineering, construction, investment, energy, technologies, just the whole urban ecosystem. But if you're interested in checking out exactly which partners were involved, there is a references section at the end of the briefing paper that I had mentioned earlier that shows all the contributors. And we acknowledge that we at the forum have a good reach with our network, but it's not all encompassing. There are others that we continually want to reach out and speak with. And I think that informs the next steps of our work is to, focus on the outreach and the dissemination of this work to make sure that we do gather more feedback from different networks that we may not have spoken with yet. So thank you for that comment.
Yes, thank you. Other questions, you please feel free. So you can now put them in the chat.
And Michael, I did want to say, I think I saw someone mention something about cities in there as well. And, I think the key decision makers that we were focusing on was investors and asset managers from the private sector standpoint. But whoever commented about cities, that is absolutely correct. In our working group, we did have representatives from New York, Sao Paulo, Cape Town, other cities as well. And, public sector with government buildings, social housing, those are incredibly important. So I just wanted to acknowledge that comment.
Great. We have many questions that have come through. So I'm going to ask our esteemed panelists to try to keep their answers short because if to the extent that you can, here they come. Question from Elizabeth Palacio. Good afternoon. How do we get industry-laden cities to comply with going green and having a climate action plan? Who's that for? Is that Oliver?
All right. How do we get cities to work on this? I think there's no quick answer to that. I think that through the networks of cities that we are working with Resilient Cities Network, they are already thinking about this. And we acknowledge that each city has their own constraints, financial constraints, different priorities. But, we're going to continue to use the platform that we have at the forum to work with these partners to advance this work.
Thank you.
Maybe I can add Maybe I can add a small comment on that as well. I think if we look at the, basically based on the information that we got from the different interviews that we did, as Oliver just mentioned, there are many cities that are already involved and are very curious to see how things are happening and what is the impact that they can get basically from the built environment. And if we put that into the perspective for the asset managers, if we try to make this link that we were talking about, the link between the just what are the returns on my investment to the bigger picture, then the cities will be more involved and also will sort of start to have some sort of a direct say in, okay, if you do this, then we will give you X, Y, and Z in order to facilitate your process as well. So if everyone starts to think about the bigger picture and not only the building that you're talking about, but also to link the impacts of the city to the building initiatives and the decarbonization initiatives, I think that would be one way to ease the process in order to bring cities into the picture. Not saying that they're not already in, but in order to make the bridge, if you know what I mean.
Thank you, Amr Hussein. We have a question from Ron McKay, which I'm going to give to Vincent. Do we know these building-related emissions at a more granular level? Is there a geographic difference? How about usage type? For example, an office building versus a data center?
Yes, of course, we have differences between the different building segments. Of course, a hospital which works 24 hours a day is different than an office building or a home. We try to have as many different case studies as we could. And give you an example, we have a social housing building, multi-dwelling in France, which is different than a refurbished building for an office building in Singapore, for example. And so I guess you explained, Amir Hussain, but we try to take into account a diversity of building to show how we can use the framework to reveal the value, and how the checklist can encompass as much building as it can in a kind of simple way, which is trustable between the asset owner, the investor, and the financing community. Of course, it's not a calculator, but it's a first step to make everyone understand at the same level what are the benefits of this framework and this checklist.
Thank you. Thank you. There's so many questions here. I'm trying to figure out which ones to give. Can Cityzenith give us, this is a question from Graham Slade, can Cityzenith update us on the urban digital twin projects in LA, Phoenix, New York, and Vegas? I did with Vegas. That's now midway through. Phoenix will be publishing, we have actually a big, the next real deliverable is Phoenix. This is kind of cool. We're going to do a webinar in June on that project with Amazon and the Director of Sustainability for ASU and the Director of Sustainability for the city. And of course, our very good friends at the Downtown Phoenix Partnership, the President and Head of Data and GIS, talking about our progress with that project. And the mission there, now we have these, it's really interesting. For those of you out there interested in urban digital twin projects, they have every 2 months a digital twin convening session where they pull all these stakeholders, public, private, and NGO together to talk about what they want from this. And they concluded that their use case is around heat and energy and the impact of heat on energy prices and affordability in Phoenix. There's a very big affordability issue. And what do you do about that? So they'd like to begin simulating the impact of decarbonizing, prioritizing, and then simulate the impact of decarbonizing Phoenix. What would that look like? And so that's very exciting. Let's see. Wow, there's so many questions. We're going to have to get back to some of these people separately. Question 4. How does the regulatory environment, maybe this would be a good one for Amr Hussain on the regulatory environment as a consultant. How does this regulatory environment around green energy affect business? Are we seeing more laws from state, local, and city governments requiring green buildings and decarbonization? You can answer this one. I certainly have mentioned the ones in the United States. and it's happening all over the world. The U.S. is actually behind other places, but it's catching up fast. And so, and actually New York is setting some trends. So if anybody's really interested, look at what's happening with New York's Law Number 97. But Amir Hussain, what do you think?
Sure. Let me take it first, and then I will pass to Vincent, because I'm sure that at least from the European point of view, Vincent also has some good points to add on to this. But let me refer back to some of the information that we got from the people that we talked to. Basically, from the different geographies, the answer is different, of course, as you just also mentioned it, Michael. So if you look at Europe, we have some laws and regulations on the EU level. And of course, if you go into specific regions and specific countries, then there are different regulations for and against some of the different initiatives that are involved here. But what I can see here easily is that, coming from Sweden myself and been living in the country for the past 10, 12 years, there is some sort of a very fast uprise in what are the initiatives that the government is having, basically, and what are the regulations that they are putting in place, basically, in order to, first of all, push for this. I'm not necessarily aware of anything that forces everyone or anyone to be net zero at the moment, but there are many cities per se, for instance, speaking about Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, that there are promoting these ideas, and there are a lot of incentives for the different types of asset owners, investors, companies that are involved, tech companies, you name it, in order to become more involved, and then they will receive investments, or they will receive co-financing, or basically different types of positive attitudes towards this. That is what the regulation is going for. I'm not necessarily sure that we will have anything particular in the very near future that would stop any building not to be net zero, if I may call it like that, but please correct me if I'm wrong, Vincent there. But generally speaking, what I'm seeing more and more is promotions and being positive towards that. If you do something, then the government, will support you for sure, and you will get some sort of an incentive from our side. Vincent, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, very quickly. That's true that in Europe we have much less, I would say, local policies as we have in the US for cities. We have more EU policies that fall down into member states, and then member states have policies. So the policies are more at the national level for building codes typically, which are now both encompassing I would say carbon emission at construction, but also at operations. But just one comment on policies at city level. I think if you look at New York, Boston, or Tokyo, for example, what is important is to have an integrated policy. Usually, you can have a carbon policy supported by a policy of rooftop solar deployment, heat pump deployment. If you take New York, for example, and then it's a cleverness. What is important is the cleverness such that it targets the right spot and doesn't target, would say, low income people. For example, if you know New York, they are not targeting social housing buildings, for example. But it's very important to have integrated policies. Stockholm was a bit different because they launched a big contest about an innovation contest, which is another way of trying to decarbonize the cities. They launched a contest around decarbonizing heating, and they didn't want biomass, so they launched a contest. And what the project which won was a central district heating with an industrial heat pump, because they had water aside the city. That was very, very interesting and very innovative. So, just opening the topic.
Yeah, there are a couple of good questions in here that are kind of more debate-like. One is, I'm going to give to Oliver. I heard that, this comes from Peter Neroni. I've heard the carbon footprint of the production of materials for new construction is so much, it makes upgrading existing buildings a much better option. What do you think?
I'm sorry, I'm just reading it to understand the question. Carbon footprint.
That's okay. Yes, he's asking that, rather than building new buildings, what about just rehabilitating the ones we have, repurposing them? Isn't that much more sustainable?
Oh. I mean, that is a really good point, Peter. I think that's something that we've definitely been thinking about and continue to promote as well. It's as I was alluding to, maybe I was going a little quickly in my read through of the slides, but it's not just about new construction. Retrofit of existing buildings is a massive opportunity and challenge as well. And, I think that coming from a global perspective at the forum, we are trying to balance this conversation between new construction in developing markets, but also recognizing that that those 80% of buildings that are needed are already in existence. Really assessing how we can reuse and repurpose existing assets, and minimizing the proliferation, I guess, if lack of a better word, of more embodied carbon in materials is absolutely critical to the conversation. So, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, I'm going to talk to that one too as an architect. Yes, as excited as we get about building new wonderful stuff, which is why many of us become architects. I think the reason I joined the profession originally was simply to design, really, which most architects do. They want to create new things. As you go around and you see how cities age, and city leadership has a different approach around the world to the aging of itself. Some of us just don't care about parts of cities. Others insist on constant sort of, reinvention. I would say generally, we should be much more focusing on reinvigorating existing buildings, repurposing existing buildings. And some of the projects that we've seen are astounding. Think about the fact that the majority of the world's retail malls are going to be purposeless soon because of Amazon or online shopping. So there's a wonderful project going on in Canada, turning those into community entertainment centers, with living and hotels, all kinds of things, repurposing something that might otherwise have died and become derelict. So certainly from a emissions perspective, Oliver talked about how much building we have to do. Basically, we have to build the equivalent of 10,000 new cities in the next 20 odd years. That's a lot of building. I think we can actually maybe build the equivalent of 3,000 and rebuild the equivalent of 7,000 cities if we're lucky in that process. So there is a somewhat controversial comment here, which I'm going to throw at everybody for fun. Let's see. This is from Juan Blanco. This current discourse seems to rest on the assumption that the world will effectively become only several, if not just one megacity. True or false? Do we think that the world is heading towards one megacity or a bunch of megacities, or is it heading towards something else? Vincent?
Yeah, I think the world has changed with COVID, right? So we are very much more digital. We are working part-time at home, part-time somewhere. So I'm not sure. We will see probably a new, I would say, suburb or hubs of where you can work without having your traffic jams every morning and every night. So I strongly believe that we have a reconfiguration of the cities with different poles where you will save time for your family, because you will go to a hub twice a week or at your office once a week. So I see a strong reconfiguration, which is a good thing for the, I would say, the balance of life, which may not be a good thing for the planet, because if you do that, you may have more. I mean, on one side, you save on carbon emission from mobility. On the other side, you need to eat your home and your work. So you have to think about what are the carbon emission for a worker being partly at work, partly at home. What is the carbon footprint of a worker today or tomorrow?
Amir is saying, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic, and I can talk about that just based off the passion that I have for many minutes at least, if not hours. But I want to connect this back to the previous topic that you guys were talking about, retrofitting the old buildings. Definitely the word has changed. I myself in the last 2 years have worked out of at least 5-10 cities based on the work that I have. And each and every time that I got stuck in one city just because either there was not a possibility to move, or there was some sort of quarantine or stuff like that, then I can even talk about one specific case. Then we were in a building and that they couldn't heat it up because the building was not heated up during the days, just because it was not ready to be done like that. You know what I'm saying? So you need to change a lot of attitudes towards the buildings. And this, whether it is a mega city or not, we are now even talking about Metaverse and then being present in different locations when you are sitting at your, I don't know, office, I don't know, in your garage, let's say. Anyhow, what I'm trying to say here is that there is a very important factor that we need to take into consideration, and that is how to retrofit the existing buildings in order to decarbonize them as much as possible. And because of that, there are so many technologies that are at hand that were not being utilizable before. And I think with the aid of the technology, there are so many possibilities here that we can start retrofitting, and that would potentially change many, many things. Let's go back to the example that I talked about, this case study that we had, and there we were talking about 32 major or big buildings within one very ancient city that they were basically, by the aid of technology, were starting to get closer to net zero. I'm not saying that they were net zero, but they were getting closer to net zero. And it is one of the technology investments that we're talking about. Schneider is one of the frontiers there. You guys are working on that as well. So retrofitting absolutely on the agenda, definitely one of the main topics here. Think about how many buildings do we have in each and every city. If we just want to forget about them and think about the new ones, that is a bit of a naive approach, I would say, first of all. But what is very important here, use of technology, use of the latest technologies that we have. Digitalization is one of the major parts that Schneider Electric helped us to get our heads around it. That is one of the topics. On that point, there was one question that I quickly saw in the Q&A while presenting. Someone was asking about, okay, who would build this infrastructure for the technology? Let us pause on that, and I will make a small comment on it, and I would like to hear about the others' opinions on that topic as well. One thing that we need to think about here is that decarbonization and whatever the technologies that are related to decarbonization, which would need a lot of infrastructure and would need a lot of communication medium in order to transmit the data, that is something that we are sort of concerned about sometimes when we talk to different investors and users and people who are working on this matter. But let us not forget about that technology is going there. No matter you want to decarbonize your buildings or not, fiber lines are being dug or being put into place for many other use cases. And then you have the wireless technologies that are out there as well, which are least costly in terms of infrastructure per se, but then are bringing a lot of bandwidth and all of these things. And communication has become a commodity. So we have to look at, I don't know, internet speeds of multiple gigabytes per each building, something similar to what we have as electricity in our homes. So it is not far-fetched that we will have that infrastructure in place one way or another. There are a lot of business drivers for those technologies that are beyond just decarbonization. And then one side benefit could be, yes, why not to use a platform in order to gather data and then react on it. So technology is very important. We can use that. Retrofitting for sure, that should be the topic of the discussion, I would say. And then mega city or small cities, I don't know. I feel like that I've been in many countries and continents for the last 2 years. Let's call it a mega city, matter of definition.
Thank you, Amr Hussein. I'm going to ask Oliver to give his opinion on that, and then I'm going to wrap up as we're getting close to an hour and a half here with a couple of things, thanking all of my guests. But Oliver, please.
Sure. So yeah, just in response to what Amir Hussein was saying, I think that you're right. The technology is coming. It's out there already, and it's going to continue to develop whether we like it or not, right? So I think that really the key challenge is how do we talk to people who are on the government side, on the public sector side, where they're regulating, creating policies, to catch up to the technology, and how do we make sure that all of this is done in a thoughtful way? And I think that the key answer to that is by focusing on what your outcomes are, and what do we want our systems of built environment assets to look like, and how do we want them to perform for us. And I think in order to do it sustainably, the days of just building one piece of infrastructure by itself to perform one single function, that's got to end. We've got to figure out how this interacts with people and how it interacts with the other systems that we have in our cities, so that it can be done in a more coordinated and efficient way. I'll just end with that.
Thank you, Oliver. These are great perspectives. What I'll do is, a lot of shareholders have written to me about questions pertaining to the company, the business. We'll get to that next time. Thank you so much. There's so much to share there. And stay tuned for announcements about various things happening. I do want to focus in this final closing of this a bit about an idea that we introduced recently. About the notion of developing a metaverse for building decarbonization. And there was an article that we put out that was published all over the world because what we've really been building, Smart World, is actually just that. It's a metaverse for building professionals to decarbonize the built environment. The buildings, cities, the objects, they're all connected. The analytics can be shared between cities, and we're beginning to automate that process. Now, what a metaverse means is, in this case, in our language, is a virtual world where objects in that world are connected to real-time information pertaining to the built environment. So we are, you'll see inside the Smart World Metaverse, everything from building drawings to electricity panel IoT readings to humidity sensors, all kinds of things. And then analytics help take this data and then make both rearward-looking analyses as well as forward-looking predictions, simulations. So because the process is so manual, we think that a metaverse is actually kind of a safe way to do it. You can kind of plug into your familiar city, get access to data, get access to tools, get access to, so that's why we work with local green building authorities everywhere, so that this becomes almost like it's easy to use as your mobile app, but for your building, where you input data and we generate results, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these initial pilots, if you will, in the Clean Cities, Clean Future initiative are about building out the framework of the metaverse. We do a lot of digital twin projects. We have digital twin partners like Amazon and others. But this is about leveraging the platform quality, character of it, so we can begin making this available to everybody conveniently, and not just working on, as you saw, some of the higher end large data-driven projects. So I think that what a metaverse really will be actually is no one's gonna own that metaverse, and certainly some people shouldn't own that metaverse. I think we'll end up with a metaverse of metaverses, or a master digital twin of digital twins that will plug into each other. So, we have a building decarbonization metaverse. We may plug into a master urban metaverse at some point, 10 years from now, we don't know, okay? And there'll be local digital twins for not just a campus, but individual buildings, even for equipment inside those buildings. It's a whole hierarchy of components in this metaverse. So that's all starting. The military has been doing this for a bit. NASA's been doing it for quite a while. Now the built environment is starting to, I think, adopt this. But I would only ask people to please keep their definition or the image that they have in their minds of what a metaverse is very open for now. It's yet to be developed. I would like to get the opinions of all of my colleagues. It's such an interesting topic on this one. And then after they speak, we'll close out. Starting with you, Oliver.
I feel like I really know very little about the metaverse, so I won't comment specifically about that. But I do feel that, there is a great opportunity to, leverage tools like digital twins, BIM, and various types of systems modeling to ensure that we get that kind of coordination that I was referring to earlier. But I'll keep my mind open about the metaverse as you suggest.
Vincent, thank you. You might be on mute, Vincent.
I was saying that I don't know how, until which extent it will become a metaverse, but I have in mind a vision of navigating from a device to a city and knowing where are the dark spots and the green spot, and being able to spot dark. I mean, let's say I have a device that is not working well in a building. I know where it is, and instantaneously I can tell someone to go there and to replace it. So it's really at operations, So it creates value, obviously.
And finally, Amir Hussain.
Yeah, try to be short on it. I think, at least from my point of view, there are two sides of the story. One way is to look at the metaverse, or if I want to oversimplify, let's say metaverse is nothing more than necessarily the digital twins. So that is one way in order to look at it. But then the other side of the story is the metaverse that we will live in. So I will keep my eyes open for that one. That how could that evolve, and how would that impact decarbonization and whatever the topic of our discussion is for the moment. But even if we take the first one for a moment, some sort of a digital twin of everything and anything that is around us, and let's look into that, and let's try to see the impact of whatever that we want to apply, measure that, and then come back out of it. I can just give one example on that topic. We talked to some specific technology manufacturer, provider, vendor, that they worked on a project in the city of Paris, that instead of running tests within the building, they did some sort of a huge simulation, which was monitored by the city of Paris themselves. And with that technology, they just reduced the cost of doing the test on what would be the impact of running the decarbonization investment. And then they recognize that, yes, by this margin, they can get something out of it. My point here is that, why not? Let's try to use the digital technologies as much as possible. Either we will live in a metaverse and metaverse of the metaverse, as you call it, or we will use that as some sort of a technology enabler in order to get better information and run our simulations in order to get our technology straight and then pick the best solution out of it. So either or, I will keep an eye on it for sure, as you called it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Amir Hussain. Thank you very much, Oliver. Thank you very much, Vincent. It's been a pleasure to spend this time with you, and thank you to all the people who attended today. We had over 800 registrations and hundreds of people attend. And those who didn't, just a reminder, there will be a link available to a recording of this webinar after that we sent to everybody. So if you missed it or you missed part of it, you'll be able to see the whole thing. And I'll close by saying, this has been really a truly extraordinary conversation. We got into all kinds of really topical things that are really on the minds of some of the most forward-thinking folks in the industry right now around this subject. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your contributions, and thank you to the audience for all your wonderful questions. Next webinar is in 1 month. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Michael. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. Have a great one. Bye-bye.